Rob Dubin, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to be here with you, John.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Colorado. I am south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the Great Resignation, the Great Reevaluation, the Great Reawakening, all these different terms that people have been using to describe the current situation that we're in with a tight labor market, organizations struggling to really get good people, and frankly, the mass exodus of people from their current or previous organizations moving to other opportunities. So we're going to be exploring all of that and really what organizations are failing to do to keep, to attract and keep good people, and really what they should be doing more proactively in response to the Great Resignation. As we get started, I wanted to share Rob's bio with everybody. Rob Dubin helps HR departments struggling with the Great Resignation keep key employees by showing burned out workers how to tap into happier life so they can reap engaging careers and fulfilling lives. After a 20-year career as a filmmaker working around the world for the TV networks and Fortune 500 clients, at age 42, he changed course. He and his wife sold their home, bought a sailboat, and spent the next 17 years sailing around the world studying human happiness and fulfillment. They believe that the questions they asked and the fulfillment they sought and found parallel what millions are seeking in our post-COVID world. I really love that. I'm just super fascinated by this whole idea of sailing around the world for 17 years. That just seems so appealing. So we can even touch on that a bit. But anything else you would like to share with me or my listeners by way of your background, personal context before we dive on in?
No, that's all good. I think you did a good recap of my 60-something years.
Excellent. Well, I am curious. Longtime listeners of the podcast know I bring it up from time to time. I really love this idea of minimalism, tiny houses, the idea of like getting an RV or a Sprinter van and traveling around the US and just living simply and going anywhere you want is super appealing to me. And you did that, but kind of like on steroids, because you did it on a sailboat and did it for 17 years. So tell us just a little bit about why you did that, kind of what drove you that direction. And then we can get into some of those other components around meaning, fulfillment, and seeking joy and happiness in life, and what that might mean for organizations trying to attract and retain good people right now.
Well, when I was a young child, or not a child, I guess in my teens, I read a National Geographic story about a young boy a few years older than me who had sailed around the world. And I always liked that idea. It just appealed to me, the travel and the freedom of it. And I was lucky in my teens. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a filmmaker and a communicator. And I went from high school directly to film school, and from film school directly to starting my own business. And I was living my purpose, and I got to travel all over the world and do all kinds of wonderful films. And I did it for 20 years, and I loved it for 19 and a half of those years. And when I stopped loving it, I stopped doing it. And that's something that most people don't do. When they get to that point, if they do get to that point in their career, they they're tied in and they locked in, and they have all these reasons they should just buckle down and stick with something they don't love doing. And in some jobs, I suppose you can still be productive. It's hard to be in a creative field if you don't really feel the fire for it anymore. So we decided to close down our film production company and go have a new experience. And we had this idea of sailing and being self-sufficient. So we sold our home and bought a boat and went off to do that.
Super fascinating. And we all have those moments in life where we take time to pause and really consider what we're doing, if it seems to align with where we're at today. And like you said, for 19 and a half of those years, it worked great for you. It fit well for you. And we all have different life stages. We all have kind of, we have core values, but our priorities might shift over time. What really is meaningful to us might shift over time. And so we talk about midlife crisis. That doesn't have to be midlife. That can really come at any point as you start to reevaluate what you're doing and how that fits with what you want to be doing and your core values and your priorities. And so you came to that realization. You made that decision. You made a drastic change. And many individuals feel trapped. They don't feel like they can do that. Maybe they feel locked into a mortgage. Their kids are going to college and they got to pay for it. Stuff like that. All these different reasons why people might feel stuck and trapped. My thought on that is regardless of what you're doing, even if you're doing something you might have loved at one point and that love is dissipated, even if you're not finding meaning, fulfillment anymore, even if you feel trapped and you don't feel like you can move to something else, I'm a true believer that we can infuse just about any type of work with meaning, purpose, and to try to align it with our values. And so I would encourage anyone to have a talk with your supervisor, your manager, take stock of your own working situation, your conditions, your environment, and have that conversation about what you need and what you value. And you might be able to work something out in your existing job. But if and when that doesn't work out, life is too short. So don't just buckle down and put your head down and spend the next 20 years doing something you dread and hate, because you're fearful about what uncertainty looks like as you might try to make a transition. So life is too short. Try be bold and try to find something that might work for you. That's not, for most people, that's not going to mean selling your house and getting a sailboat and sailing around for a really long time. It may mean that you still do the job you don't love, but you pick up a new hobby, you do something else that brings fulfillment in other aspects of your life outside of work. But whatever it is, we gotta look for that, because taking care of ourselves, our self-care, our mental health, all of that is going to be largely derived from where we, how we spend this time. And in fact, work is where we spend most of our time each and every day.
That's great advice, and I couldn't agree more. I don't recommend to people that they do what we did in terms of, to complete lifestyle change. But that was, I think, your approach of talking to your supervisors and figuring out how you can do your job, and every job has parts of it that we tolerate and that don't turn us on. And the idea is to just have more of the part of it that turns you on. So that's great advice. And the good thing that's happened out of the pandemic and the Great Resignation is that HR people and your supervisors do not want to lose you. And so they are much more open to helping you design a job that fits you a little better still within the same organization.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good segue. I mean, they should be interested in doing that. The question is, are they doing that? And so whether we're talking about HR departments specifically, or we're just talking about organizational leaders, supervisors, managers, all the way up through executive levels in the C-suite, what they should be doing versus what they have been doing, what they are doing, aren't always the same thing. So what do you see, organizations, what are they failing at doing to stem the tide of the Great Resignation and to continue to attract and retain good people?
Right. Well, let me address just something you just said, and then I'll segue into the answer to your question. Human beings in general resist change, and we change when we get enough pain. So the HR department feels the pain first because they're getting all these requests to fill jobs that they can't fill. But when it becomes the department head's problem that he doesn't have enough people and he's starting to feel pain, then they will start doing more and more of these things to make their employees happy. So they are changing depending on how much pain they feel. But the issue with the Great Resignation, and you talked about some of those memes that have come out of the pandemic. One of them is being called COVID clarity. And that's where people during the pandemic examined their lives and they said, gee, I'm not happy. I've done all the things that I was supposed, I mean, air quotes, to do. I got a good education. I met the right partner. I had a couple of cute kids. I got a good job. I get occasional promotions and I basically enjoy my job. Why aren't I happy? I'm supposed to be happy now. And so that's one of the first big paradigm shifts that happened during the pandemic. And organizations have definitely failed to respond correctly, because in 2021, we averaged 3.9 million job losses a month. And now, a year and a half later, we're at 4.5 million, and it's holding at 4.5 all through 2022. So all those podcasts and articles and everything everybody's read about better benefits and more compensation and all those traditional things that worked clearly are not working. So that's the first thing that HR and C-suite needs to recognize, is what used to work and what you've been doing in the last 18 months is failing. And obviously, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So they have to change. And so my solution, and I teach happiness, and part of my study of happiness had to do with our years about out sailing, but the positive psychology and the science side, which you probably know, is that there's two parts of happiness. There's hedonic happiness, which makes us feel good in the moment. And then there's eudaimonic happiness, which is that life purpose and meaning, which makes us really feel happy long-term and a much deeper happiness. So, and then the third little piece of the science of happiness is that the circumstances of our life, our salary, our financial circumstances, our health, and our career really only account for about 10% of our happiness. So when a company institutes the massage benefit or the health club benefit or Taco Tuesdays, first of all, half of your people don't like tacos, so you miss them. And half of them don't like massages or health club memberships, so you miss that half. And then for the half that you do hit, you're only hitting, you only could potentially move the needle by 10%, because that's in that little 10% of our circumstances that affect our happiness. So even if you nail somebody, they love going to the health club, that's really only 10% of their happiness that you could potentially move. And then the third failure is that it is that hedonic happiness, which only lasts a short time. So we're really aiming at the little tiniest part of the target with most of our benefits and compensation-oriented benefits to people. We're not hitting them where they really live, what could really make them happy, which is things that contribute to purpose and meaning. And, a couple of statistics, I heard one statistic that when people get a raise, they're only happy about it for 16 days, 16 days. And then it just becomes, it's like the new car you wanted. You just definitely had to have that new car, and you love it when you get it, but 6 months from now, 8 months from now, it's just your car. And so if we aim at those hedonic happiness things, and if we do hit the target, we're still only going to move the needle a few percent, and it's going to be short-lived. And then they just take their new salary for granted, they take their new perk for granted, and it doesn't give them the same joy. Whereas if you can help them find real happiness in their lives, then they stay on the job, and that eudaimonic happiness leads to resilience and optimism and a different way of thinking. The experience of our lives is not what happens to us. It's how we think about what happens to us. And happy people think differently. So, you can't, the HR department can't solve the problem of every bad boss or every microaggression in the workplace or every other work, or they can't change your job in some instances. But if you are an optimistic, happy person that experiences that eudaimonic happiness on a regular basis, those problems become smaller in your mind. And so you are able to deal with them, and you have resilience, so you get burned out much less easily.
Yeah, that's great. And looking for those intrinsic kind of factors is what I'm hearing you say. That's another way of framing what you're talking about, that we can focus on the meaning, the purpose, the fulfillment, those elements. Everyone needs, like, you need a baseline to take care of your needs, your pay, your benefits, your healthcare. You need to be able to have a car that works and that you're comfortable with. You need to have, a shelter. All those things need to be there, and it needs to be equitable. And if it's not, that's going to cause problems for sure. But if you're really looking for ways to engage your people in an ongoing way, you have to design work that is meaningful, fulfilling, has purpose, and allows them to grow and develop. And if you're not doing that, then ultimately people are, what we've seen over the last couple of years is more and more people are willing to, maybe in the past they would say, I'm just going to stick it out until I get to retirement or whatever. But now they're just saying, life is too short. I want to move on to something else that makes more sense for me and my family. And sometimes that means a new job with a new company. Sometimes that means, gig work, or just doing something that's more flexible, or completely recontextualizing their priorities, to the point where they're like, I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to, get a sailboat or a Sprinter van, and I'm going to do that instead. And, there's a thousand different ways people can design their lives, but ultimately we as human beings, we want meaning and purpose, and we want fulfillment, and we have to find ways to embed that in our lives. Otherwise we're, if our work, which takes up the vast majority of our waking hours, if that's not providing it, for a lot of people, that's going to lead them away from their current job.
Absolutely. And you're right that you have to have that threshold. People don't, when they're looking for a job, one of the key things is the salary, so the compensation has to meet that basic threshold. But a couple of different statistics, one of them that I'm aware of is that one survey, and I don't remember the exact age of the people, but it said younger workers, 76% of them were willing to take a pay cut to work at a job that had meaning for them. And a previous guest on one of your shows had a different statistic. He said they would take up to a 24% pay cut to get a job that had meaning for them. So, and definitely the younger the workers are, the more they think in that terms of there's got to be this life satisfaction associated with it, for sure. And one of the things that is challenging for HR and C-suite is that we're, of course, very data driven, as we should be, but we're getting bad data in a couple of different ways. An engagement survey, if you use the Gallup Q12 survey, or whether it's that or your own, every question on the survey is some version of how can we make you happier at work? Not in your life, but at work. And people aren't resigning because of just work unhappiness. They're resigning because of life unhappiness. And that's that COVID clarity that they got during the pandemic. So the data that you're going on is bad. And then there's other data that's also bad, because your employees are lying to you on your surveys, but they're not doing it on purpose. And this is a real catch-22, because if companies are proactive and they are doing surveys to find out what would make their employees happy, most people, if you say what would make you happy, they answer with those hedonic questions: more salary, better benefits, more vacation time, et cetera, et cetera. But the catch-22 is we know those things don't really make us happy in the long term. So employees are giving you bad information on the surveys, and then companies react to that, and it makes them happy for a couple of weeks or a month or two, but it doesn't last. So companies really need to focus on teaching happiness. And we have this mistaken idea that, as I said earlier, when I've checked all those boxes of, the good career and the good education, and I have a good partner and a couple of cute kids and a nice home, I'm supposed to be happy. And during the pandemic, as I said, people found out that didn't work for them. They're not happy and they don't know why. Well, if you think about anything you're good at, John, if you play a musical instrument, or if you're a skier or a mountain biker, or some sport you do, or a craft you do, or your job, everything you're good at in life, you probably got some instruction in it and then practiced and practiced and practiced until you got good at it. Why do we think happiness should be any different? And it's really something that needs to be taught. So Harvard University has had a happiness studies course for only a couple dozen years, and it's already the most popular course in the history of Harvard University. So we think it's not something we should study and be taught and learn, but in fact it is, just like everything else.
Yeah, it's the Harvard happiness course. That one is just really fascinating to me. I do a lot of research in the space of worker engagement, satisfaction, and even life satisfaction, to your point. And holistically, being able to take a look at this, it's something that organizations need to do better at, and it's something that individuals are just striving for. It's in part a sad reality, that, everyone always wants meaning, fulfillment, happiness, purpose in their lives. And, depression, anxiety, these things are not new. These have, been a struggle for many people for a long, long time. But there's been increasing, data around both the impact of COVID and the pandemic on things like stress, anxiety, depression, and with increasing rates of those. But also we see with younger millennial and Gen Z individuals and workers that they have increasingly high levels of stress, anxiety, depression, even suicidality. And it's heartbreaking. It's really sad. And so this is a systemic societal issue and problem that we need to try to figure out how to address, because people just they're floundering for meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. And if we can provide that in the workplace with our jobs, if we can design jobs that are providing that for people, I mean, that's going to meet a huge need for especially the younger workforce, but for everybody. And it's going to help them. It's going to help the organization because you're going to have good people, and it's going to help society at large. So, I mean, ultimately, this is the kind of paradigm shift we need to go through as leaders within organizations. How are we going to make sure that we're addressing these types of needs so that people can have a more holistically happy, joyful life? And that doesn't mean being happy or fulfilled doesn't mean that everything's always wonderful. It doesn't mean that you never have frustration, setbacks, disappointments. It doesn't mean that you're never free of stress or anxiety or depression or those things. All of that is just a part of the human condition. We all experience that. It doesn't matter how idyllic, and how privileged your circumstances are, you're still going to feel those things. That's just part of the range of human emotions, and circumstance will influence that. But ultimately, we also, we can create better environments where people have a greater likelihood of discovering and finding and creating opportunities for them to feel joy and meaning, fulfillment, purpose, and happiness on a consistent basis. Recognizing again that there's going to be the natural ups and downs. Everyone has mood changes and adjustments, and all of that's just normal. But we need to have that paradigm shift in order for organizations to get good people and to help our people thrive and really achieve their, reach their maximum potential. So what can and should anyone listening today, what should they be doing moving forward? So if they're listening to this episode, what's the first couple things that they should start to think about or start to do if they're trying to shift the way they're approaching attracting, retaining good people to better map with what you've been sharing with us today?
Well, I I completely agree with what you're saying, and I feel that this is really the silver lining in the pandemic, is that millions more people are now looking for their own happiness, and I think a good chunk of them will find it. And
Oh, I lost you. You froze.
in wellness programs,
Hey,
because
Rob,
yep.
sorry, you froze there for a minute. Can you just kind of go back, and I'll cut that part out? Oh,
And find it. Am I
yeah,
working?
sorry, you're freezing up a little bit, but Rob, this has just been a really fun conversation. We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to go dig into here, but hopefully this has given people something to think about, not just for your own life, but for as you're trying to create better environments and circumstances for your people. Rob, before we wrap up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Well, let people connect with me through my website. It's just my name, robdubin.com. And I think the final word is that the silver lining in the pandemic is that millions of people are looking for their own happiness, and I think they will find it. And it starts with making the decision that you are worth being happy, that your life is worth making yourself happy. I think that's the main purpose we're here for. So I think people can make a decision that they want to be happy, and then they can find avenues, my teachings, other people's teachings online on how to get there.
Thank you so much. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Rob and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.